All right, so I'm using this hard shader, which is a preset here. Check out your presets. Turn the pressure up a little higher so you can just get a little bit firmer mark. Turn the softness up just a little bit. And when I'm drawing Dr. King, I'm just going to look for a couple things. If I drew a plumb line down here, and I wonder if Artrage has that. Show grid. Oh, cool. So you can I wonder if you can change the grid. That's fine. So here you can see that the eyebrow is a part of his face that sticks out the furthest from this perspective, and that there's a nice gentle curve that moves down toward the chin there. So what I want to make sure of in my drawing is that this is the furthest anchor to the left of the drawing, and then I want to find this little zigzag that works down to the cheek here, and then I want to find that curve that moves down here, right? Now you lose a little bit of the chin in the shadow here, gets a little lost, but it's not that important. Don't even worry about that. You want to make sure you draw the eyelid as it kind of touches the edge of the face there. Find the angle of it. Look for tear duct as an anchor point on the eye, and then if we look between the two eyes, there's a slight angle to the set of the eyes that's like this. So if you've got the grid moving horizontally, right, the eyes are not exactly on that horizontal grid, and you can see that because you've got one tear duct here and the other one up here, and there's a diagonal line between the two. So I'm just going to put down a couple marks here, and I'm not going to get too fancy with the details because number one, I'm too tired to care about them right now. It's been a week for everybody, but I think our family, we have not been in the traumas and the intensity of the people that have lived through these tragedies face to face. We know some people in Minneapolis who part of a church community up there that's really in the thick of it, and we know that what we're dealing with is nothing compared to that. This is but we have our normal stuff, which is just chronic illness in the family, juggling COVID stuff, trying to keep a 5-year-old busy, and we're not allowed to let him see any friends for the 3rd month in a row now, that we're just still kind of juggling what we can and can't do with health related issues in this current climate. So that and end of semester stuff, we've just been wearing down a little bit. And again, that is not complaining, because we got nothing to complain about. We are safe, and while we aren't exactly healthy, we are fighting for that health, and we have tools to do that. So again, not complaining, just feeling a little weary. And I think that weariness is something we all feel, and just wanted to talk a little bit about the way that expresses itself. I saw a post on Instagram where I was pretty offended by it, and so I just jumped right in. And typically I would be a little bit more thoughtful and less combative, but I just was kind of a little more raw than normal, and especially around the race relations stuff. And it just some of the perspective out there are people that in my opinion, do not really grasp the inequality that is structurally a part of American society. And I want to talk about that from the perspective of a teacher. So guys, I teach Artrage, I teach Photoshop, I teach Procreate, I teach all that stuff. That is my job, and it became my job because it's the thing that when I'm not oil painting, I'm digital painting, and when I'm not painting in gouache, I'm digital painting. So it just was like a natural fit, and there's not a lot of qualified people to teach that stuff digitally, and there's a ton of young people that are super into it. So guys, I was working with ambient design and Artrage, and working with one of their reps, and we were kind of trying to figure out how to get software out deployed to students so we could teach this stuff remotely, and we could get tablets in their hands and make sure that drivers were installed and make sure everything was going to work. And one of the things that I wanted to just point out, and I probably have some of those students listening to these videos right now, or this video right now, is that every single kid that, and every single family and every single adult that I work with, not one of them excuse me, not one of them lives in a house like you see on TV. Our family is working off of I'm kind of like hamstrung in the sense the way that I can be a provider to my family, because I'm my job, my life is half of the time is caregiving for child and person who's in a healing process that's taking a long time. And so I don't have the freedom to just get out there and make extra income. I have to do that from my home because that's where I'm needed. And I love that I have the gift of being able to do art, to add a little extra income here and there. But it's nothing like I could do when I was a gallery artist full time, and just going to shows and doing plein air events and all that kind of stuff. That's an awesome life, but it takes you outside of the home all the time, and I can't do that right now. There just is no way. I got an offer to go do even some teaching that's going to take me abroad, to Europe, and to do some teaching there, and to do like some workshop kind of stuff, and it'd be online, virtualized, all kind of cool stuff with it. And then you're just thinking, how are we going to do that, right? Because how are we going to get, who's going to take care of everybody if I leave for a week? And how am I going to do the summer art markets, or how am I going to do this gallery event? How am I going to do the plein air event? How am I going? And so it's always complicated. And I know that I'm one of many families, many families who are under supported, both financially and otherwise, to be able to manage all the things that we're asked to manage. And it's a small complaint compared to the explosions of racial violence and the generations and generations and generations of cultural, structural, institutional inequality, police violence, etc. So that's, again, not complaining. It's just the context, And so that said, that's our context. But even in that context, the majority of home situations that students are in are far worse. Young people are far worse than what we're dealing with at our house. You have students who don't even have a place to work. Don't have, the only computing device they have is the one the school provides. The internet that they have is having to be provided by school district because they don't have it at their house, right? And that's the tip of the iceberg. It was very eye-opening to be able to go and visit a lot of different homes of a lot of wonderful students and see how much harder life is for so many kids than you would ever dream. And we live in a nice part of the country. We live in a place where everything is 7 out of 10. I mean, everything. It's like bikes everywhere, hiking trails everywhere, food and cool restaurants everywhere. People leave their doors unlocked at night. Stuff is calm, you guys. It's nice. It's pleasant. And yet, there's a ton of wealth inequality, and a ton of food insecurity, and a ton of homelessness, and a ton of injustice. And the school is this great equalizer, tries to get out, and I'm delivering tablets to homes, and I'm working with the people at Artrage to get software licenses temporarily that kids can use, or we're working out stuff with our IT department to buy licenses for, trying to make it work to get through a semester with kids. And gratefully, everybody is awesome, and everybody's so helpful, and everybody's like trying to make it happen. but there's a lot of work that goes into getting a very little gain, and it's not it shouldn't be so hard, and but even with all that effort, it doesn't change the dynamics of what a lot of these young people are facing every day. And here we are in America, right? Like, this is the land of plenty, right? We all have that American exceptionalism, as though the rules of the world don't apply to us. And I'm just always real shocked at how life really works for so many hardworking people, and how difficult it is. And yeah, it's beyond description. And I think I love being a teacher. I love being able to go see that stuff a little more face to face. I love that our school has whole teams of people that's their job, is to go visit with kids and try to find ways to make sure that they can be successful. And that definition of success is very different, right, from person to person, but be successful in the sense that that they're just getting to school, that they just have food to eat. Our district is amazing in that when COVID lockdown shut down schools, school districts stayed open to provide food for families that were food insecure. And we had students in my classes that would spend the whole day doing digital drawing and painting, and they're loving their life, and they're just having fun, learning from the best artists in the world, collaborating with people all over the world, doing all kinds of cool stuff. And then as they leave, they're carrying their bag of food out that was given to them by the school, because that is what's going down on the other side of this. Like, we have a world where like poor, underfunded. We've never been, I think it's like one time in the last 10 years has our school district been funded at its per pupil allocation accurately, and to the degree that like we're always underfunded per pupil. So we're doing more with less for every kid every year, and then trying to, every teacher, people are emailing, working, thinking, bringing stuff from home. Teachers have stashes of food on their desk for kids who they know don't have food, and it just goes on, and you think, how is this possible, right? That we have got to be able to do better than this, where the basic operation of society can't come down to underpaid teachers providing basic needs for underfed students who are under-supported by the district funding because the state budgets aren't lining up, and so on and so on. So think about that. Like, our district is great. It's full of passionate people who are trying to work really hard to make it right. But the structures around all of these people it just isn't as good as it should be. Teacher wages should be different. Funding for kids in need should be different. School supplies should be more affordable. All this stuff should be different. And then that's just the basic stuff. But then you get into what's going on with the flare up around race relations. And I was listening to a message from a church up in Minneapolis, and it was real. It was one of the most visceral messages. I was just very curious to know what the people who live there are dealing with and how they're dealing with it. And I just think that, I had an argument with someone on Instagram, like I was saying, and they were talking about, well, the world is full of decent people who are trying to do a decent job. And I said, well, if the world is so full of decent people, then why is the world so indecent? And we kept having that argument, right? And that's just the thing, is that it's intolerable that there's so much food insecurity in America, especially for young people. It's intolerable. All of the things that you see, the race-related violence, the race-related institutional violence, all of this stuff is that. I mean, I'm biting my tongue here because I don't want to turn into some like soapbox thing where we all know, and I'm not saying anything new. It's just it's just that it's on my mind as I'm sitting here, and I think sometimes we get caught in whatever injustice. What am I trying to say? So what happened to George Floyd is unbearable. I couldn't even digest it. It was so disgusting to me. And then people will find out, oh well, look what bad stuff that he might have done, or so and so might have done, or whatever. And so as though that would somehow wash away how egregious and vile the killing of him was. It doesn't change anything. There's no detail that you can bring up, or that will be brought up, that will change the fact that injustice was done. That is an injustice that has been done for ever since the first Europeans set foot on the American soil. There's no excusing it, right? Like when you think about like the idea of manifest destiny, we all are familiar with that when we're in grade school and middle school. We're talking about manifest destiny and the settling of the West, the conquering of the wild, and the enculturation of the natives, and all these things, right? It's just white supremacy. It's just this idea that we the Europeans, I'm saying we, right? The Europeans have got a better way of doing things. We're a superior way of doing things, and it's inevitable and blessed by the divine powers that this is how it's going to go, right? It's like white supremacy from the start, and that's it's hard to stomach. I have a friend that was telling me about how it was telling me a story about American Indian children that were being sort of like re-educated into Western culture and the settling of the West, and as these two cultures were kind of clashing, right? And how they were trying to the whites were trying to teach these indigenous people about like this track and field stuff, and trying to get the kids to all race and do this competitive thing. And I don't know who these kids were. I don't know what their tribal heritage was. It was a secondhand story, but it was something that stuck with me because the whole idea was getting the kids to compete to win. And this really fast kid, they get them all in the starting line, and all these American Indian kids are getting ready to run, and they start running at the call to run, and they're running toward the finish line, and the fastest kid is way out ahead, and he looks back and he just stops, and he says, you could just see the gears working in his mind. He just stops, and he goes back, and he grabs the arm of the next fastest kid, and then they go back and they grab the arm of the next fastest kid, and then so on to the slowest kid. And then they all jog across the finish line together. And how mind-boggling that was to the organizers of the race, the whites of the race that were trying to get these kids to compete. and how for whatever reason, wherever these kids were from, and whoever their parents were, and what lessons they learned, or if it was just, but it was just such an overwhelming shift for the European backgrounded people to adjust to this reality where these kids didn't care about winning in this context. They wanted to finish together. It reminds me of an article I read about it was narrated by the representatives from Sweden, who are like the education secretaries or Ministry of Education. These people that were flown across the world to, at the time they were the schooling system with the most high performing students, right? They're still up there, of course, but they're just knocking it out of the park. And so the equivalent educational body in the United States says, hey, we want to talk to you guys. And they ask them on the phone, so why are your kids so high performing? Why are your kids so high performing? There's got to be a reason. And so they say, yeah, every kid, doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, it doesn't matter if they're, one background or another, every kid gets, this meal at school and that meal at school, and every kid gets all their supplies taken care of, and every school works cooperatively. There's not a competitive environment between the one school and the other. They work as teams and support, whatever. So this is their education ministry talking, right? And they say, we tell everybody that when they call. We tell the Americans that when they call. Say, what are you guys doing? We want to talk to you, learn from you. And they go, yeah, sure. But what are you really doing? So then you fly them out, talk to them, and then they can't. It's like an ideological blind spot where when they're told by the Swedish people, this is what we're doing, and we can't adjust, we can't acclimate to that reality. We think, no, there must be something else, because we're so ideologically we think that competition equals success, right? And I think that it's not like that idea came out of nowhere. I mean, you can point to evidence, why that might be a functional way of looking at the world, but to think it's the only functional way of looking at the world is pretty arrogant, And I think there are a lot of us in this world that operate in a different focal point, and to think, is it really, even if it were the best way to get high performance, would it be worth it? Would it be worth it? If in a society, can we build a society where it actually is a society for the people, or for the greatest number of the people, or for more of the people? Or if there, how do we get to finish? Not to say that we need to enforce some sort of social equivalency in every way, some sort of Marxism or something, but what if there was a society where we know that there's a lot of fear around that. It makes sense, right? But I think there's a lot of nausea around what we have been doing, and I think the human animal is very, we all know this is complicated. Like the longer you live, the more complicated it seems, and the more gray area there is. Rarely does it seem like things get more illuminated as you live. It usually seems like it gets more opaque, and I think we're all just muddling through. But with the amount of resources, both in terms of hearts and souls, intellectuals and scientists, religious people and social thinkers, we've got to do better than we're doing. And I was having that argument on Instagram with someone, it was, if this is a decent world, Or if this world is full of decent people, why is it such an indecent world? And that's what I just keep coming back to. There's no excuse. It's inexcusable. I want to talk to you about another, just telling stories, just telling stories for a little while. I'll tell you another story. Working as an art instructor, have a lot of colleagues who are professors and teachers of different things. One of my colleagues is what at the time was an English instructor, and so he's been at this forever, and he finally just starts innovating and creating all kinds of unique approaches to assessments. And with this one particular class, he tried something that was like it was a group final. And the kids were allowed to work, the young people were allowed to work collectively, collaboratively on the final. And this was something they were fully aware of. So he says, okay guys, so here's what I want you to do. You can organize to work on your own, you can work in groups, you can do whatever you want, right? You just have to turn the final in by this time, and you will get the same grade as everyone in the group that you align yourself with. And so all the students, it was like this amazing social experiment, right? So immediately they start breaking off into teams, and there's no offense to football players, but there was a very aggressive and loud and bold football player who just started taking charge, right? Team captain style. And this particular individual was probably the poorest student in the class with respect to like attendance and engagement and work ethic and so on. But he was loud, and he was forceful, and he was authoritative, right? So many of the students jumped into his group and started following orders, basically, and knowing that they're going to get the same grade as this kid who was in the parking lot as much as he was in the course, who had probably read more nutrition facts on the food he was eating during class than actually reading the text that they were supposed to read. But nevertheless, they were there taking orders from this guy. While at the same time, some of the more brilliant kids in the class, with respect to like, when I say brilliant, I mean hardworking, dedicated, focused, reflective, those kids said, "Whoa, no thanks," and they formed their own group. And then there was a kid or two who just didn't want to deal with the whole social dynamic and just wanted to trust their own preparations and just did their own thing. In the end, all of those students in the group that were run by the authoritarian kid, all of them did poorly. They all got like a D, I think it was. And even their collective might couldn't subdue the impact of the aggressive, mouthy one. And all of their grades suffered as a result. And they did this willingly in their final. And some of them, lowered their grades as a result of who they chose to be their partners, right? Whereas, by contrast, the other groups that chose a little more wisely, perhaps, ended up with better grades. And how often does that happen too? Just that, we in society know very well that that some things are just right and some things are wrong, but we bow to the authoritative voice. We don't want to ruffle feathers. We don't want to, where the human animal is good at following orders and is good at, if someone's speaking loudly and aggressively and authoritatively, well, they must be right, And I think that that's something that we have to think about. Why do we do that? Why do we just bow down so easily and start following when we know in our hearts that we were made for better things, that we know in our hearts there's the hypocrisy that we constantly are pushing down, that's eating at our souls. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, and we're not addressing it. We're just pushing into it further and further, and we wonder why we're overeating, over medicating, over drinking, and so on. Why we're so freaked out all the time as a culture. It's because we're not listening to our hearts that are screaming at us to stop. You know, like it's such a weird dynamic, right? Like you've got these people that are, you know, like we live in Colorado. I mean, it's like nature central, mountains everywhere, hiking trails everywhere. It's beautiful. People will drive the biggest, nastiest, gas guzzlingest SUVs up to the mountains and ride their ATVs around the mountains, and just sit there, you know, with like their big cooler saying, "Oh, I love the mountains," you know, and it's just like the entire mountain is echoing with the roar of their engines and the smell of the two-stroke gasoline and the whole environment that we're out there to celebrate and enjoy is literally being trampled by the very lives that the people are living who are somehow supposed to be championing this beauty in nature. Well, if you honored it and you loved it, you would be living a different life, because every day of the week you are living in opposition to this nature that you claim to cherish. It's sort of like a churchgoer who lives in a gated community, right? And they actively are doing everything they can to get as much wealth and accumulate as much material security as possible. 6 days of the week. And on that seventh day, they go to church and talk about loving the poor and go serve food at the local bread line. And that feels good, right? But with the rest of their life, they're living in active hostility towards those poor, working in the jobs that we work, consuming the kind of goods we consume, etc., right? And that's not even to mention the third world countries and the unbelievable oppression that happens there with all the goods and services that we claim from these places. And we all know it. It's not like I'm saying anything new. It's just that we know it, and that's why. You know, it's like sometimes we'll be working with a young person who's struggling with debilitating anxiety, but they have zero self-reflection. You know, they're going out and doing super destructive stuff or suspect stuff, and not seeing any connection between that and the reason they're feeling why they're feeling. So, you know, and so I think it's we feel bad because we're not living well. And we're not living well because we're not taking care of each other, ourselves, our environment. We're not taking care of anything that is holy in our world. And we can't live like that and have anything be okay. Our family has poured $100,000 or more into medical expenses in just the last few years. And we're not equipped to keep doing that, right? And so every day when I drive my car to work or to the studio or to whatever, you know, wherever we're going, I feel it in my bones. I don't want to be doing this, right? I don't want to be doing this. We make a beautiful yard for our little boy to run in because we're trying to social distance and can't have buddies over, so we're trying to make our yard really spectacularly fun for our little kids. We have something to do in this quarantine. But we're like all this lush, beautiful grass, putting in this, doing that, and then you just like sit there and you're like, none of this is sustainable. None of this is sustainable. And then it just, the paradox of being in our cultural situation is so rough. And it takes a toll. Like there's no way that it's not taking a toll. And and the race relations. Like I was watching HBO's The Watchmen, and that whole show pivots around these ideas of like excavating these ideas of racial injustice. It starts with the massacre in Tulsa in 1921, which was an almost forgotten horrible racial violence massacre that happened. And it was honestly that show which brought that historical brutality to my awareness. So after the show, I watched the first episode, I was like, oh my gosh, and I go read all about it on the internet, and it just blew my mind, right? How did I not even know about this? And you look around and you just wonder, I have a 5-year-old, and like how do I appropriately equip our boy for this when we can barely grapple with what we need? A wholesale shift, wholesale shift. In what singular category of life is everything going great in our culture? Well, geez, I can hardly think of anything. And it's not to blame the big other either, like educators are paid poorly and athletes are paid immensely, and that's because that's what we value. We value entertainment, not education. We value consumption, not community. We value, all the wrong stuff. We're paying the price. But it's a vicious cycle because all of us know, if someone said, hey, I've got a magic button and it'll turn you into, it'll just turn your skin any color, you'll be switch your race, what if that just magic button was pushed and everybody's races just flip-flopped? How many of you would be super excited and feel happy and safe that you, if you went from like white to a minority, or if you went from like, how would that feel? We all know that there are great complexities with being an African American in the United States. We know this, and it's become so flagrantly obvious that even the biggest denier of that, looking at the Floyd case, has nowhere left to hide. They have to face that. And so when that is the reality, and we all know it's the reality, when that's the reality of the environmental situation, we know it's the reality. When it's sort of like we're all acting as if is like sort of like an abusive household situation, which maybe this all makes sense in that context, where like if gosh, I don't even remember what book I read this in, but there's a book where it says, you're like a little kid and you hear the gunshot, and you run out of your bed, you come down the stairs, dum 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 dum, and then your mom interrupts you, she stops you, and you go, mama, I heard something loud. What was that? And as a little kid, it was a gun or something very dangerous. And your mom is just putting on this fake smile, and she says, oh honey, it was nothing, everything is okay, just go back to bed, sweetie, just go back to bed. And in your brain literally short circuits in that moment, because this person who is supposed to tell you the truth, this person who's been taking care of you, this person that you love and who's your one, they're your guide, they're your helper to get through this life. They just told you a lie. They just told you a big lie. And your brain can't really compute it. It's like when I grew up, there was alcoholism. And something's off. You know it. The person that you admire and love, who's been your caretaker, that something's not working. but they're like, they're like your person. There's your guardian. They say, oh no, everything's fine. And you know it's not. And it like, but you can't put your finger on it because it's just so slippery. And it's not fine. And you feel bad. But they're telling you it's fine. And you feel, and you can't, but where do you go? You're a kid, right? Where do you go? You can't be like, I'm moving out. I feel so uncomfortable. That's not even in your view, in your like perspective. You're just like, ugh. And it's just anxiety, right? And so it's sort of like, that's the world we're living in, like globally, right? We're like, we know it, but we're all acting as if it's not real. And it reminds me too, and I'm sorry for the serious ramble here, but like, it reminds me of, there was this like, kind of, he's pretty like intense and kind of bizarre philosopher I was watching some YouTube video of, can't even remember his name right now, but he was talking about this Eastern European like folk tale or something, and it's like this, there's some peasant couple, and they hear a knock at the door in the middle of the night, and the husband gets up and the wife gets up, they go, should we go? And they go to the door, they answer the door, and then they open the door, and there's a witch at the door. She says, I'm gonna make an offer to you, right? Let's make a deal. Whatever that means. But she says, I will either take from you 1 cow and take from your neighbors 2. Or I will give you 1 cow and give to your neighbor 2. You decide. So the husband and wife, they kind of take in what's going on. They look around. They converse together. They, in hushed tones, kind of talk through the options. And of course, they say, take from us 1 and take from our neighbors 2. And I say of course because think of it this way, you guys, like, and and this is something that's probably more poignant when working with young people. I don't know if adults are as much like this, but have you ever been like in a conversation with somebody and they share the good news, maybe with you or in a meeting with a group of people, and they share some good news, and it's the good news that you really have been working, something that you've been working toward yourself very long and hard. And how many of you feel, instead of feeling just joy and elation for them, you feel a twinge of guilt and a stab of jealousy toward them. And for those that have felt that stab of jealousy, you know, maybe you're like a fellow artist that says, hey, I just got picked up by this top gallery, and you're like, oh, I mean, awesome, right? Or if it's like you know, a promotion at work, or it's you know, whatever, new partner that's you know, they show you the picture and they're just this magnificently gorgeous person or whatever, right? Whether it's if it's that twinge of jealousy, that scarcity mindset, that as long as they're lower than me, then I feel okay. As long as that exists, we're all screwed, right? There's no going forward in life from that until we solve that moment, till we can resolve that. And based on just the sampling of questions that I do with young people, there's a tremendous number of them who would have said the same thing as that couple in the story. They would have said, take from me 1 and take 2 from my neighbor. Instead of seeing the bounty lift all of them up, I would rather see them lose more than me than gain more than me. And I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not even like talking about any specific thing at this point. I'm just talking about sad stuff. And the reason I'm talking about sad stuff is because George Floyd is representative of many people across hundreds and hundreds of years in this country, and hundreds of years before it was a country, or was this country. Unnecessary death, hostile and violent death. It's not something we should ever grow immune to, obviously. Why are the Martin Luther Kings of the world so rare? He should be the person that we all are. He should be the dime a dozen person. If we were all listening to the souls in our hearts, or in our chest, or the hearts in our chest, if we're following the demands of that inner life, the world would be full of Martin Luther Kings. We are so many of us distracted, corrupted, lost, and the world we have is the world we have chosen, and it's not good enough. And so I think it's sometimes I'll tell one more story. This one's not so dark, I promise. There was my stepfather. As growing up, he was a doctor, a dentist who became like a pain management doctor. Worked with a lot of people who just couldn't get better, and he had all the hard cases, people with chronic migraines, chronic TMJ disorders, the chronic head and neck pain people, and it's so debilitating, And so he would do a lot of workshops and clinics and connecting with people across the world, trying to find every answer out there for helping people. And sometimes he'd run across some really strange people, and sometimes he'd run across some really interesting people. And one of the more interesting people that, he wasn't like a shaman or a mystic or anything like that. He was a Western medicine doctor who really believed, though, in a more holistic approach. And that would carry him to some interesting places. And he believed that the answers weren't all here within the boundaries of the United States. And so he was always a person just asking questions. And sometimes those questions would lead to strange places. And one of the strange destinations he landed was this woman from Argentina who was like, she could see auras and then read stuff about you through your aura. And I was kind of like, dude, whatever, I might come back from college and my parents had gone crazy or whatever. But it was interesting. I remember I was in the kitchen. I was like microwaving a burrito or something. For those of y'all that know me, that's a pretty standard activity in my life. And I'm standing next to Aura lady, who's like getting a glass of water, and she says to me, I'm like 18 or 19 years old. She says, "Do you want to know the secret of life?" And here I'm one of those kids who's like reading all the philosophy, self-help, religious texts. Like, I'm interested in knowing the thing that makes life, the meaning and the mystery, right? And so of course I say, yeah, let's talk. And she says, she's so, I love it. I'll always remember, she says, when you eat. I'm looking at her, she's really short, it's like white hair. She says, when you sleep. I'm like looking at her, kind of waiting for the okay, where's this going, right? And she said, when you go to the bathroom. When you take a shower. When you're on a walk, be on a walk. When you're with a friend, laughing, be laughing. And then she just grabbed a cup of water and left. And And she was right. It's like that's the kind of advice that you can believe in. That there, here's this woman. She was like a deep person of faith, a person that had like traveled the whole world, and has all these like followers and people that she's like worked with all over the place. And her answer to the secret of life was this really simple truth about being present. And the way she said it was kind of perfect. And I remember just standing in the kitchen and just sort of smiling and laughing to myself, thinking how right she was. And I don't even remember now why I told that story. I had a point of connection, but I was thinking about something that made me think about that lady. But I'll have to, probably when I rewatch this, when I'm doing the edit, I'll be like, oh, I was trying to say this, but right now I don't even remember. But I think that when we actually take charge of the life that we have, I hope this moment, with all that's happening in America right now and all the unrest around the violence and the injustice and the treatment of people of other races, and the focus of our world on all the things that don't matter. And I hope. Oh, I just remembered. I hope that what we find is a way to phase shift, so to speak. Because that lady who said the thing about the secret of life, she talked about life like energy. She talked about it like vibrations, and she said that she would just talk about people's vibration, basically. All right. So I'm summarizing, but really it just came down to that. And she would basically, after every conversation with her, I would just have this feeling that what she's getting at is that the universe is waiting for us to wake up. The universe is waiting for us to basically phase shift into a higher form of energy. And I know that sounds like as woo-woo as it gets. When you think about it this way, right? Like, there's something different energetically when my 5-year-old son is sad about something that he wants selfishly, and he kind of inwardly collapses as he, has a tantrum about wanting that thing. There's something very different energetically about that than there is when he comes out of that and finds his empathy and says sorry, or whatever, right? Or whatever's going on. There's energy about it. There's like it you feel it, literally feel it, right? So it doesn't seem all that odd to think that energetically something is off, and energetically something needs a remedy in our society, and that we need to phase shift towards something better, because it's not good enough. It's not okay. We've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten why we are. And we've forgotten what this all is. And one of the ways I get reminded of that is every time I watch something on the news and the citizens, the human population, is referred to as a consumer, I bristle. I don't want to be seen as a purchasing unit in an economic equation. That just, to me, feels so gross. It feels like it's missing the whole point of what I am and what my brother is and my sister is. I don't want that, right? I reject it. And then at the same time, I'll spend that evening looking at cryptocurrencies and wondering if I should invest in Bitcoin so my son can have a better graduate or like retirement or whatever. Like, it's such a trap. It's such a trap. It's like we have to play this game expertly while not actually becoming involved in it emotionally or in our identity. And it's so hard. It is so hard. And I think I don't want to play that game. It's gross. I want to make artwork. I want to connect with people. It's like why when I had a 1.5 million followers on Google Plus, it's why I never monetized my YouTube. It's why I never did any of the things that would have boosted my other social media accounts. I never did all that stuff because I was like just a single guy as an artist, and I was like, I don't need any more money. I have enough money. I don't need anything. I just want to make art and connect with people, and that's all I want it to be about. And had I monetized my YouTube, and had I like put out a bunch of tutorial videos back then when I had, and had I connected my YouTube to my Google Plus with all those verified and all the millions of followers and all that stuff, I would not ever have to work today. I would just be, sitting at home making YouTube videos like I am now, but instead of catching a dribble of Patreon support or all that kind of, it would be just this massive thing. And I don't regret that. I think it, I just wish it could always be that way. Well, now though, I have a wife and a son, and I need to provide, and she's going through a health crisis, and he's, whatever, and I can't leave out, and it's just all complicated. And now it's like, it's complicated, right? And I don't want it to be. And it shouldn't be. I think we're forgetting who we are. But I like things like, Patreon, because it feels like a little less gross, because like I can kind of just do something that I feel like is good. Like I almost think about it like making cookies. Like say, hey, I'm gonna just make these cookies because I like chocolate chip cookies. And you may find my channel and be like, yo, I like chocolate chip cookies too. And I'll say, really? And then I'm like, well, I have some extras, so I just put them on the windowsill, and you can grab whatever you want. And then you're like, oh, really? Thank you. And then you say, well, hey, that's really awesome. Here's $5. And I'll say, well, no, I don't want $5, right? And you'll say, no, just take it, like whatever. But we don't have to do that. We don't even have to talk about the money part. It's the nice thing about Patreon is we don't have to talk about that stuff. I can just do what I like to do, and if people feel excited about that and they want to share something, then that's cool. But I always have a hard time with the monetary stuff, because I don't want to I appreciate it a lot, and it's been a huge help to our family immensely, but it's not like but I never want it to be like about that, I that's why I kind of like the Patreon thing, because it stays a little bit away, a little removed from it, and we can it's like I can show my gratitude for humanity by like making something that I feel like might be helpful, and I can like try to listen and learn and be helpful and be more of a good guide or help or teacher, and if people want to like jump in and participate, then they can, but it's like in no way is it ever expected or even talked about. And that's kind of like as close as I want to come to that monetary thing. That's why I also like the gallery more than self-promotion, because I can just like make paintings and just drop them off at some place that's like this mystery building that turns my artwork into something else, and I like that way better than putting like, oh hey, print sale on my Instagram or something like that, because I just don't like that. I don't want it to be about that. I understand it sometimes has to be, and I have to be a promoter of my work to make it viable for my family. Otherwise, I have to go pick up a second job somewhere or whatever. But I think it's just all complicated, and it's all that way because of the world we have chosen to build, and that's the part that's just so complicated. It's so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking to have to try to explain the brokenness of the world to a 5-year-old. And when they say why, when you say, well, it's like this because, and they say why, and there's no good reason why, other than people are just being evil, or people are being selfish, or people are being greedy, or people are being cruel, or people are being willfully blind to injustice. And how do you explain that to a 5-year-old? It's impossible. And if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, it should not exist. And that's why we have to do better. Like, And we all know it, right? Like everybody knows it. I'm saying the most obvious stuff in the universe right now. Sometimes I feel like when you study history or whatever, it's just like a big giant bloodbath. And it gets really old. And I think my prayer right now is just that the world that our boy can grow up in is better than this one, and that we can phase shift towards something better, because we are literally in paradise. And my son loves watching science videos. He's 5, but we'll just sit and watch like a adult targeted audience. Like what I mean by that is like stuff made for people with like an education, you know, who have complex vocabulary and basic understanding of physics and chemistry and all this stuff. And we watch like space videos for that caliber of education, and he's 5 and he's just all in. He wants to watch that stuff more than he wants to watch anything else almost. And we were watching a video this morning about the search for other worlds and how they are using like using light and stuff to make very strongly educated guesses on the chemical compositions of these different worlds and all kinds of stuff, right? And he's talking about the super Earth, Kepler, whatever, and we're just kind of like having all these cool conversations about this stuff. And the whole time I'm just thinking like we're looking out into a billion stars, and we're trying to find these other worlds. And there could be none better than this, though. I mean, this is like we who was it? Maybe it was Joseph Campbell that said, "The Earth people's like an apple tree, apples," and so here we are in this place that peopled us, that birthed us. You know, that we came out of the soil, so to speak, right? And there's no more perfect paradise than this for us. But we have completely wrecked it. And I still have hope that we can do better. I don't know why I still have that hope sometimes, but I do. And I know that like getting an electric vehicle or solar panels or whatever isn't gonna fix it, although I still want to do that because it would be better than the alternative. But and I know that having the right elected officials isn't gonna fix it, but it sure would be nice to have some better ones than we have. And I know that having the right beliefs or the right people around you isn't gonna fix it, but it'd be nice if we had some different priorities. And I just it's so comprehensive. I don't know how y'all feel about Elon Musk, the Tesla CEO, but I like what he said in this one interview. He just said, "All I do every day is to try to be a little less wrong," and kind of matching that with one of my friends who's was an environmental planner. Now he's an architectural planner, and he just talks everything is the art of muddling through. In an ideal world, we'd be able to scrape and start again, but we don't get to. We have to sort of build within this broken system. How do we do the best with some very incompatible starting equipment, the art of muddling through. So I hope I haven't lost a bunch of my audience by being so like soapboxy. This is me just sort of verbally processing all the junk that's been in my brain over the last couple of days with all the horrible things that are just the unbearable things. When my wife first showed me the video, George Floyd, I couldn't even watch it. Like, I knew I had almost like an obligation to watch it, but I couldn't bear it. Literally couldn't bear it. Like, how does something so horrible happen that you can't even, like, that the fact that it exists, your brain just skips off of? Like, if you've ever hiked, been hiking and you cross a river, and there's like a wet river rock in the middle of the river, and you're like kind of walking across it, and you've got like siping on your shoes, and you're like got the right equipment, but your foot, every time it touches that rock, it just literally, contact and slip is like one singular motion. Just your foot just slips off, and you just feel that of your foot just slipping off the rock into the water. That is literally what my brain was doing as I tried to watch that video. And to this day, a week later, I can't look at it. Like, it's too painful. And I've seen enough of it to get it, right? But I can't watch it the whole way through. And I don't even know if I finished this thought back when I was talking about the coming down the stairs and the abusive family situation where the mom says, "Honey, everything's okay. Honey, everything's okay," and you know it's not okay. But when you grow up in a world where all the authorities are telling you, "Hey, everything's okay." Oh no, that's not happening. Oh, how could that happen in America? No, American exceptionalism. And that's not America. And that wouldn't happen here. This is the land of the free, the home of the brave. Right? And we got all of these ideological things we're not allowed to question, things that are not supposed to think, things that are taboo, things that are bad words, people that are bad actors, and we know how to condemn what to condemn. We know what's allowed to be spoken about, what's not allowed to be spoken about. Just like it is with dysfunctional households, you can't bring up certain topics in some households. It's known, right? It's understood, and we have that globally in this country. You say certain things are assumed, certain things are off limits for challenge, and that's the danger, right? And certain things are so ingrained in our thoughts and our the way we live and work that it's just, to question them would be like questioning the color of the sky. Like, people just look at you like you're an alien, right? I don't even know if this painting is any good. I'm just like, I don't even know where my head is today. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for listening to me ramble, and I hope I haven't sounded like a preachy idiot. I think I just needed to, I was trying to kill two birds with one stone. I was like, I need to process, and I need to put out a YouTube video because I haven't in forever, and so I'll just try to do both. And maybe that was a really stupid idea. You can let me know in the comments. I'm sure somebody will if I hopefully not offended too many people, but I just wanted to be back. I care about the YouTube. I have Patreon supporters who are really freaking amazing people who write the nicest things that I can even imagine someone saying, and hopefully you guys know who you are. I haven't replied to a lot of those messages over this month because I've just been completely checked out, and it's hard for me when I'm that emotionally overburdened to deal almost with the more like sincere, heartfelt, passionate comments and thoughts, because I want to give every bit of that passion and sensitivity and time and energy back to those comments. It's a lot easier for me to do the just, hey, what's up, find my brushes here, click this link, that kind of stuff. But that heartfelt stuff, my heart has just been like so full. I haven't had the brain space or heart space to properly digest and reflect the energy that y'all deserve in those comments, but they're coming. The other thing that's coming is a bunch of new artwork. I have some things lined up that I'm excited about, and a focus on some stuff that I need to have to kind of work my way through some of this. I'm not going to try and pretty this painting up too much more. I mean, I don't feel like I did Dr. King much justice with this painting, but I did try. But it's I think it was more about the conversation, or just me kind of doing some verbalizations, than it was about any particular quality in this painting. So hopefully it was helpful though, and I did do some technical dialogue in the beginning, so hopefully that was good too. I think obviously I'm not an African American, and I have to be careful not to speak too firmly or too authoritatively about anything to do with that struggle. I just was overwhelmed by what I was seeing. My wife was overwhelmed by what she was seeing. We were just overwhelmed in general, and you know, I'm technically biracial, but not African American, and so yeah, we'll have different experiences, and I don't think there's any comparable experience to the African American experience. I think that's a unique tragedy in American history, and it needs to be grieved by all of us. And I just am excited to learn as much as I can, and to find ways to support and advocate, and would love to listen to your thoughts too, and see where everybody else's head is at, and kind of go from there. But you guys, I really just appreciate if any of you are still here, that you're here, and that that YouTube exists as a medium to communicate while we're in this lockdown and don't have a lot of other options for some of us. Also appreciate having Artrage as a pretty awesome drawing tool to be able to do some of this stuff with. So that's all I got, you guys. Here's my rambly Martin Luther King drawing, and stay safe out there. Much love to you guys.